Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. So today is Saturday, December 1st, 2018, and we're going to be going through a 2020 election prediction between Senator Bernie Sanders from the state of Vermont and President Donald Trump, of course, the incumbent president of the United States of America. So, like I said, in the beginning of every month, I will be doing a Sanders and Biden prediction. I will likely do my Biden prediction tomorrow and my Bernie Sanders prediction today, but overall, this will be just a collective video of where I think that the 2020 electoral map will be for an election between Bernie Sanders and Donald Trump. So I know I did this a couple of days ago. A little bit more data has come out. Something interesting that's not really related to this, but the North Carolina 9th District is now too close to call, according to the Associated Press. And that's because there are possible accounts of voter fraud in terms of absentee ballots. I'll probably discuss it in another video because it is something that we actually need to discuss. But if the Republicans do lose that race, which it's been retracted from them, so that means AP puts them at 199, the Democrats at 235, the Democrats possibly could have 41 net gains in the House of Representatives. But again, that just all comes down to whether or not everything works in favor of the Democrats. It probably isn't going to happen, but the fact that a race has yet to be called and it's already December, that worries a number of people in terms of both Democrats and Republicans. But again, Democrats took the House majority. This one seat will not make or break them, but the GOP could possibly go under 200 if they do lose a seat. So enough about that. We're going to start off with our Sanders versus Trump map. So the states already filled in are safe states. These are states that have been characterized as safe by 270 to win, and I'm pretty trusting in them. We know that Bernie Sanders is probably not going to carry states like Utah or Wyoming, and neither Trump for Illinois or Maryland. We're looking at states that have been very solid for past Democrats, and for good reasons. I mean, we're looking at these states that haven't really voted against how they vote in terms of congressional levels, in terms of governor level, in terms of Senate levels. All of these safe states right now have, I believe, all of them except for the state of Maine, which is partially filled in as safe, have two Democratic senators or a Democrat or an independent who caucuses with the Democratic Party. So right now, looking at that, that's a pretty good sign for Bernie Sanders. When we look at some of these Trump states, I'm assuming except for the state of Alabama, all of these states, except for West Virginia, and Montana, right now have two GOP incumbents. Okay, so Indiana defeated with Joe Donnelly being defeated, Claire McCaskill being defeated in Missouri, Heidi Heitkamp being defeated in North Dakota. Montana and West Virginia and Alabama, Doug Jones will be defeated in 2020 most likely. Only real two states here that don't have two Republican senators. As for the state of Maine, that one does not have two Democratic senators, but it has an independent who caucuses with them and then a Republican. But overall, these states, again, very solid in terms of how they've been voting in the past for their political party that they vote for in presidential elections. So it's not like this is some drastic difference from what you normally would see on an electoral map. However, there are some states that are now toss-ups that previously wouldn't be toss-ups. States like Texas or Georgia or Arizona. Yes, Georgia and Arizona were toss-ups in 2016 to an extent. When you think about these states, they are more lean, more likely GOP states than anything. They were just overhyped because Hillary Clinton did a little bit better in polling than people thought in these Republican states. But it could be because these states are taking a drastic turn in favor of the Democratic Party, with Arizona going to a Democrat in this election in 2018, and then Georgia only going to the GOP, where you normally would win by double digits, to less than 5%, and the state of Texas being less than 5% in the Senate race Senate statewide. That is insane. We're looking at a state, Texas, has been stereotyped as one of the most Republican states, even though in all reality it really isn't. The state of Iowa voted more for Trump than the state of Texas. And when you think about that, keep in mind Obama won the state of Iowa, and he won it both times, in 2008 and 2012. He won it along with the state of Ohio and North Carolina in 2008, but failed to capture Arizona, Texas, and Georgia. However, those three states are now toss-up states for the 2020 presidential election. Though, for the Democratic Party, they're probably not going to carry the state of Texas with Bernie Sanders. The only real candidate I could see possibly being contesting Texas to a real extent is Beto O'Rourke, and he is not on the ballot in this situation. I do not factor in VP candidates until we actually have the full decision yet for the Democrats, but I do for Mike Pence, but he doesn't make much of an impact outside of the state of Indiana, so he's not really going to be talked about, nor is he ever really talked about in a number of my election prediction videos. But Texas would go in favor of the GOP. This is a state that is pretty solid when it comes down to presidential elections. Yes, it does get closer in some Senate elections. It wasn't close in the governor election. And right now they do approve of the president. Unfortunately for the Democrats, Donald Trump's approval rating has been going up. But it didn't really correlate with the GOP's performance in the 2018 midterms. It's been around the same since the midterm elections, and we're not even a month out, but his approval rating has been ticking up just a little bit. But again, a lot of the things he has been doing hasn't been really as controversial as it has been in the past. And that could be just a new Trump trying to change the way he does things, or we just aren't noticing as much. We just have become desensitized to everything that the president does, or any type of member of Congress, the White House, even a part of the American political stage. Anything they do, we have become desensitized to because we see it on a daily basis. So right now, Donald Trump's approval rating is likely going up because people are getting used to what he's doing, rather than seeming like it's always quote unquote crazy. But right now, Donald Trump has 163 electoral votes, Bernie Sanders with 190. Where can Trump get the rest of the votes? So first of all, I actually want to do this map with safe, likely, leaning, and toss-up. So Texas is going to go to the likely column for the GOP. It's not going to be a safe margin, but probably around 6 to 7% for Donald Trump, unless something changes and there's another type of Democratic candidate. But keep in mind, this is Bernie Sanders. The state of Georgia likely will be lean GOP, along with the state of Arizona. To be completely honest, Bernie Sanders probably isn't going to do super well amongst the African American population in states like Georgia, or the Latino population in states like Arizona. These are two states where you really need specific candidates in order to do very well in, which is why these individual candidates did very well in the Senate elections and the governor elections compared to where they did to what previous candidates did in the past, and compared to presidential election candidates. Keep in mind, Hillary Clinton probably couldn't appeal to Latinos as much as she could appeal to African American voters. But when you have specific candidates who can appeal to that base alone, that's when you do pretty well. So again, that's why those states are lean GOP states for right now. Bernie Sanders probably isn't going to be able to rally up those voters as much as you think he could. Keep in mind that this electoral map does not all of a sudden heavily favor the Democrats just because they won a couple of elections in 2018. A lot can happen. If you compare 2010 to 2012, drastic difference. The state of North Carolina I would also characterize as a lean GOP state. Right now, Donald Trump has just been doing pretty well in the state of North Carolina in terms of his approval. He also has been in the state of Florida. That is another state right now. Actually, when I think about the state of North Carolina, I've seen a number of articles discussing how North Carolina could be better for the Democrats than Florida, but I really don't see that argument. Democrats came in with less than 1% in the governor and Senate elections in the 2018 midterm elections, and I get it, quote-unquote Democratic wave year, but presidential elections always do better for Democrats than even in their best performing midterm year. We look at 2008, the Democrats were able to get such a large majority, they were winning in states like Idaho. And then if you go back to 2006, they had a majority they held right now. But again, it doesn't always correlate. 2010 to 2012 was a letdown for the GOP. But right now, again, even though it may be a Democratic wave year, 2020 could be an even more Democratic wave year. So right now, North Carolina, I still think is a little bit more out of the reach than the state of Florida at this point. Even though it has been consistently voting for Republicans, look at the margins. 0.2% is nothing to flaunt. 0.6% is nothing to flaunt. We're looking at numbers that just aren't too good for the GOP. And the Democrats are just narrowly losing. They aren't losing by such a large margins that this state is all of a sudden a solid GOP state. But North Carolina hasn't really voted for a Democrat. I mean, they did in 2016, but the last time we went to a presidential candidate besides Barack Obama was 1976. Last time Florida went for a Democratic candidate besides, I think besides Barack Obama was 1976, if I'm not mistaken. I think it was Jimmy Carter winning the South, unless he lost that state specifically. But again, Florida actually has been showing a lot better signs for the Democrats. Yes, some House pickups in North Carolina. Unfortunately, those are specific races. These candidates on a nationwide level cannot really grab all of these states at once. Georgia, Arizona, North Carolina are all not going to go to one candidate unless they have such a strong VP that they can actually appeal to multiple minority groups at once, and they're able to capture a lot of the white vote. And that's one thing that Bernie Sanders probably is not going to do in the South. It's possible in the Rust Belt, which we're going to get to in just a second. But right now, North Carolina, again, with just a lot of the larger margins for the GOP than states like Florida just maybe stereotyped as a GOP state because they just defeated a Democratic incumbent. But again, that was a 0.2% margin. That's not large at all. This is a state that doesn't vote for Republicans by large margins. North Carolina does, compared to the state of Florida. Okay, if we look at North Carolina's 2016 margin, it was larger than Florida's 2016 margin. North Carolina is a state that pretty heavily votes for GOP candidates, and they probably will since they currently approve of the president, which means that the Democratic Party is not necessarily at the advantage. Yes, Florida also approves of the president, but for some reason, the Democratic Party does a little bit better than they really should be. But if we go back to 2018, a lot of factors could have influenced the race, where they could have won the race, could have lost the race by larger margins, but North Carolina just I do not like seeing the point in my comment section where North Carolina is argued to be a better state for the Democrats than the state of Florida. I just don't really see how that can really come about just because of one midterm election. And if we look back at previous elections, it's just an overall better state for the GOP. But 190 electoral votes for Bernie Sanders, 205 for Trump. Virginia and Colorado and Nevada. Virginia and Colorado, I would characterize those both states as likely Democratic states. They've been Democratic states in the past. Nevada, I would put in the lean Democratic column. If Hillary Clinton could win there, Bernie Sanders likely could win there. And also just reviewing the 2018 election results and then reviewing the 2016 election results in 2012 and 2008, Nevada has been pretty good for the Democratic Party in the past, and it likely will be, considering the approval rating of the president in that state. It's pretty good for a Clinton state, but not the best for a swing state in 2020. Nebraska's 2nd district right now will be a pure toss-up because I think Bernie Sanders can do pretty well there, but it all comes down to the candidate on election day. I mean, I cannot really make a clear distinction as to who will win that race until we get even closer to the election, but Iowa will likely go to the GOP. Minnesota will probably go to Bernie Sanders along with the state of Pennsylvania, and also in the Northeast. I mean, New Hampshire, right next to his neighboring home state, going to do pretty well for Bernie Sanders. I think that the 2nd district right now is a pure toss-up. Donald Trump did well there in 2016. Obama did well there in 2008 and 2012. And Bernie Sanders, again, possibly could appeal to them a little bit better, but we're going to see on Election Day, or we're going to see in the near future when I do update this prediction, which I do once a month, as I mentioned before. State of Ohio just came out with a poll today that shows Bernie Sanders leading by 1% in the state of Ohio. Now, again, we are 2 years out, so a lot can happen. But Ohio right now I'm going to characterize as a pure toss-up. Before I would have that as a lean GOP state. Unfortunately, the numbers just aren't looking good for Trump. A 1% lead with a 3% margin of error means nothing. So right now when I look at that, Bernie Sanders is just doing a little bit better than what you really would expect for a lean GOP state. Donald Trump won here by around 8 to 9% in 2016. He's lost a number of those voters. If we look at 2018, the Democratic Party did a little bit better, but that's nothing to just really grasp onto to show for the 2020 election. That was because they had an incumbent who underperformed the margin they were doing in polls. So again, right now, that's why I'm not too confident in that 1% lead, especially with a 3% margin of error that could throw the whole thing out of whack. But right now, Ohio, I am comfortable characterizing as a pure toss-up state, whereas Michigan and Wisconsin, I'm going to put as lean Democratic states. These are two states that have held Democratic identities for a really long time, and Donald Trump was able to take those in 2016, but they likely will go back, especially looking at Wisconsin and Michigan. A gain for the Democrats in the governorship, a hold in the Senate elections, Pennsylvania, a hold for the Democrats in the Senate and governor elections, multiple pickups in Pennsylvania, a couple pickups in Michigan, no pickups in Wisconsin. Wisconsin was the closest of them all, but Bernie Sanders does well in these primaries. I think he would do pretty well in a presidential election, especially looking at the data from 2016 and Obama's numbers of being able to rally voters the same way Bernie Sanders is able to. A lot of parallels being drawn between the two, just, again, a different party platform, but I do think that Bernie Sanders could do pretty well across the Rust Belt, especially since Trump won all 3 of these states by less than 1% in 2016. So that finalizes today's video. 278 electoral votes for Bernie Sanders, 211 for Donald Trump, and 49 pure toss-up electoral votes. Thank you guys for watching this video. Comment down suggestions below, and I will see you all tomorrow.